Feisties, this is your favorite and feistiest women's sports show, all the why behind what's happening in your favorite sports. I'm Kelly O'Mara.
And I'm Sarah Gross. And this week we're talking with mountain bike world champ Sammie Maxwell about her struggles with an eating disorder and why she's actually glad that her governing body made her stop cycling. Kelly, I don't know. Okay, yes, we're talking about that. We're also going to talk about who is responsible for the terrible culture of eating disorders that we have in so many sports? Who should take responsibility? And
who should take responsibility? You want to just solve that today,
yes,
right
and
now?
how we need to proceed with solving that problem.
Yeah, so Sammie had a lot of really interesting things to say, and so we'll definitely talk about that. But first, obviously, highlights from this past week, and I want to give a big shout out, since we did a whole hockey episode last week, PWHL opening weekend, the first game between the two expansion teams, Seattle and Vancouver, that we talked about last week. They set a record for PWHL home attendance. It was 14,958 people.
I appreciate the precision in the number. I mean, on social media, it was just 15,000.
Sure.
But
I always feel like they're making that, like whenever, because I've been to many sportsing events, and they always put the number of attendees, up on the, I feel like they're making it up a little bit. I think they are.
In the situations I've been in where I know the organizer of the event, I can tell you that occasionally they make it up. If they haven't been able to fully track who came in, who left, who sat in the seats, like who bought tickets versus who actually entered the arena in this case. Unclear whether it's around 15,000.
Around 15,000
which was
people.
A full stadium. They sold out all the tickets, which is the most important thing, I think.
I'm fine if you just count ticket sales. Whether or not somebody shows up is not on you.
Yeah, like if your kid got sick,
fine.
you still wanted to come watch the game. Like we can count you as a women's sports fan.
Yeah. So we posted a video. Maya, who was on last week, was at that game, and she covered it for the Ice Garden. And of course, in the comments, we had all these men being like, well, now the attendance is going to go down. Ha, ha, ha. Like all women's leagues. And you're like, actually, no.
Actually, no. I think in particular in Vancouver, Vancouver is here for their new pro women's leagues. Like they showed up for the Vancouver Rise games, and which is the NSL or their soccer team. And they will show up for the hockey as well.
We had our big, America's NWSL final here in the Bay Area, like we were talking about. And they also had a sellout, which again is like a little, like they sold out at 18,000. And I've been to that stadium. It's where the MLS team plays too. I've been there for the U.S. women's national team send-off game. And so my husband and I were like, 18,000, does that seem about? I think they put out like more bleachers for the men's game because the men's team actually sells out at 19 something. Which again goes back to like it's always a little tricky how many people you can fit in.
Oh, that's interesting. Or do they fit more? How do they add more bleachers?
There's like one side where you could like.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, you could like add seating.
Okay, but
anyway,
I mean 18,000, 19,000, whatever. It's a full stadium. So
it was a full stadium.
I know last week you were concerned that the Bay Area might not want to drive just as far as that far south, but it sounds like they did.
Well, it's an interesting. Okay, we're going to talk about the NWSL right now because it was they have a number of growing pains at this point, right? Obviously, people still came out the final. It's a neutral site final still, which means that they just pick a place, and that doesn't necessarily mean those two teams are going to play, or that one of those two teams will be the team.
Yep.
And so obviously in the Bay Area, that's what happened, right? We had a DC team and a New York team playing in the Bay Area. And so it was a lot of just like big names. Like you had a lot of you had Megan Rapinoe came out, like all of the old soccer players came out, like a lot of big like soccer. But it's like a little hard, of course, to fill a stadium with people when there aren't those team supporters here. Right. So I think in the future, the NWSL is going to have to move away from neutral site games. I understand why like a growing league kind of needs to know in advance, but we got to change this. Like it just doesn't make any sense. It's not how you blow up an attendance in a fan base,
Right. So, okay, tell me, so this is something I'm unaware of, is like how the stadiums get booked. And if you're, so in the men's leagues that have been going for a long time and are well established, right? And you have two teams in a final, but you don't know where
Like who's going to, right.
like which team, oh sorry, you're in the semis and you don't know which two teams are going to the finals. How do you book the stadium ahead of time?
Well, I think the thing is, Sarah, that when we talk about these men's leagues, they have priority at those stadiums. Nothing else is like sub-booked for during the time of the, like there is nothing else booked in the Chase Center during the time of NBA playoffs. Like that's just not happening. That's not
Right.
like they don't book a concert or a, like what happened this year for WNBA playoffs, a tennis match. Like that just doesn't happen. Like
Right.
it is the NBA stadium. The NBA stadium has priority.
Yeah.
And so the problem I think for these for the women's leagues that are up and coming is they don't own their own stadium, and so they can't just be like, or not. Some of the teams do, but not enough teams, and not all of the teams have their own stadium, that they have to book and schedule around like the ice capades. And that's what makes it right. Like that's a problem. That is a problem for future growth, right?
It is. So how many times do we have to sell out the stadiums before we're able to book in advance? I would like to know, stadium owners.
Let us know.
Let the women's leagues book the stadiums, even if it means a little risk that you might not have someone in there that night because your team loses.
So it was a big deal here, though. It was all over the news here. It was all over the radio. It was like they were doing events in San Francisco. I told you last week I wasn't going to go because it is like an hour and a half drive and it's like an all day. And that's not, and you were kind of like, what don't you feel like you should go? And I was thinking about this more over the weekend.
Well,
Sarah.
I don't
was
think.
like,
Okay, sorry. Just to be super clear, it's not like don't you, because we are in agreement that like watching women's sports is not like an eat your broccoli kind of situation.
Right.
Which this is like that's a direct quote from you. So like you would never hear from me saying, Kelly, you should go. You need to. You can watch at home.
I did watch it.
Okay.
But
yes,
you were basically like, why am I not like, oh my God.
Yeah. Like, do you have, I was wondering like as a child soccer player, whether you had an excitement over the fact that we now have a vibrant pro league for soccer.
And I was thinking about that while I was watching and while it was like all this hype here over the weekend. I don't think it's the same as how you felt about the Northern Super League this year in Canada because that was new and that was inaugural, or like the PWHL 2 years ago. NWSL has been around for 13 years. And before that, the league that came before it, the WPL, was around for 6 years. There was a women's pro soccer league when I was a kid that folded. The women's pro basketball was around in the 80s. There was a league. WNBA has been around since I was, right? Like all these leagues, like sometimes I think we forget, not that like, oh, women's sports have the same support in history that the men's do. Like the men have definitely gotten a head start, but sometimes we forget like there have been leagues and there were trailblazers and there were like these pioneers. And so it's, to me, I have not had the like, oh my God, wow, we have a league now. There's always been a league. To me, there's like this, okay, now it's like, okay, it's getting hyped on regular TV. Okay, it's getting like, it was on, just broadcast last night or 2 nights ago. Okay, it's getting like regular, like big fan tailgating. Right. Like to me, it's like it has to cross the line. It's not just like having the league and like, are they getting some amount of money? It's like, are they getting soccer star money? Or is this cracking the mainstream? Is this making, the local, it was all over the local news this week. All over.
Right. Yeah, I see.
And it wasn't just like, and it wasn't just on the local news because like, now the girls finally have someone to look up to. There was some of that, but it was also a lot of big names, big players, that kind of thing.
It is starting to, women's sports and these leagues are starting to turn the corner of exactly that, of like, it actually is mainstream. We're actually talking about the sport. We're actually talking about the players, right? For better or for worse, right? Like we talked about, like there's actually big corporate money starting to come in. And it's not just like, oh, the little girls now have someone to look up to, but also the little girls do now have people to look up to,
they do,
which I think is, and I think there's you and I are 10 years apart, and I think there is a little bit of that.
There's a for sure. There's a shift.
In my childhood, I was literally like stuck to the screen every 4 years. Olympic Games was the place I could see women doing sports on TV, and there wasn't much else.
The last time I went to, it's called PayPal Stadium, the soccer stadium down there, for one of the send-off games for the women's national team, there were people like in line buying beer arguing about, whether, like, because we were about to get the Bay FC, the NWSL team, and they were like arguing over who we should draft and who is right. And that's when you're like, okay, we've cracked into, this isn't just, yay, women, you can do sports. Right. This is like, she can't hack it in this league. We need a forward,
Yes.
And also, I will say it has changed a lot from, I remember when Alex Morgan got in trouble for like playing a drinking game after some big win. And this year, Rose Lavelle, who scored the game-winning shot, of course, was taking shots after. Because there was like a joke where her parents were going to take a shot for every goal she won. And she was... Anyway, so it has shifted, right? It's not just like, oh wow, we can't do that in front of the girls,
right? Because we're supposed to be role models for little girls.
And I think Rose Lavelle is a role model. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying that tone has like they can also still be soccer players and adults and have fun and celebrate.
Right. Well, thank God, because meanwhile, in Canada, hockey players could apparently get away with whatever they want, full license to do, per our conversation last week.
Right.
And like little boys and girls observe that. Not that I think that I feel like adults should be held to like the same standards across the board. You know?
Men and women. Yeah, probably.
And just, responsible human beings.
It was a good game, though. I was watching it, and my husband walked in and was like, oh, is Trinity Rodman playing? Because that is, like, the only player he knows, like, currently, because all the big names have retired that he would know. And unfortunately for the NWSL, Trinity Rodman was playing, but she might be leaving for more money to the European leagues, and this is a problem.
Oh, to the European leagues.
Yes, and this is a problem if that's the only player that, the random average band
And this
knows.
has to do with the salary caps.
Yeah.
And
so this is another, like NWSL is at this point where like it has been around for a long time now, but it really has started to make a turning point in the last couple of years of like, okay, it's a real league now. You can make real money. The players, it used to be heavily subsidized by U.S. soccer so that U.S. players would have a place to develop.
Yeah.
And they paid a lot of that salary. And that is no longer the case after that whole like equal pay kind of settlement and like changing how the U.S. women's national team is compensated. So now they're dealing with like real like league expansion issues. And at the same time, the European leagues have decided they care about women and have put a lot of like they have obviously European soccer is much bigger than US soccer. Their leagues are much more developed. So now that they are funding like the women's half, there's way more money for players to make over there. So we've already seen like Naomi Girma leave, Lindsay, I want to say Horan, but whatever her married name is now. So like a lot of the big players. And so now you have like Alyssa Thompson left this year. And now you're like, if Trinity Rodman leaves too, like we can't lose all our big name players to these like mega deals,
right?
Or we won't have like a league anymore, or we won't have a good league anymore. It'll be unfortunate,
right? So is this a kind of wait and see what happens kind of situation? Do we need more
I think
investors?
This is
like what's the how do we make
they
this
are
better?
Literally thinking about changing the salary cap to keep Trinity Rodman because they're so worried about like they can't keep losing these like mega names. It is right now, it is a cap for the team. It's like 3.5 million for a team. It's supposed to go up to like 5 million for the whole team by 2030. So I don't know if they're just going to like make like start to think about how to make exceptions. I don't know what they're going to do. But literally the commissioner has weighed in and been like, we must keep her.
Right.
So
which weirdly feels like the opposite to what the WNBA commissioner has been doing. And at some point we're going to have to circle back once we start getting, it hasn't been in the news cycle lately, but once we start getting more updates about the WNBA negotiations too.
Yeah, I think there's still, there was an update or so like a week or so ago where they are reaching kind of a conclusion. But yeah, it's interesting because obviously again, like WNBA's, 15 years further along than the NWSL. Yeah. So their salary caps are like with the money we're talking and the fan size we're talking is like significant. Like the TV deals are bigger because they had like a decade head start. So it's kind of like, yeah, do we get to that point now?
Yes, it's interesting. Like the bumpy road of the evolution of all of these leagues is fascinating, and definitely how like they seem to follow similar paths, but in different eras. You know?
Definitely different eras. Yeah.
So
anyway, it was a good game. Gotham FC came through, which I mean, this is the second time they've won the title when they were the lowest ranked team going into the playoffs. So I feel like people should stop counting them out,
That's wild. And and just 1-0. So it was a close game.
And it was, I mean, you could say that's just because like all the teams are pretty parity, like pretty evenly matched, and that's why you just get these like upsets. Because a lot of people were like, well, Washington is the better team, they have a better coach, they have better players. But what's the saying? Big players make big plays in big games, and Rose Lavelle is gonna score in a big game. So anyway.
Cool.
It was
any
very
regrets
exciting
of not attending, Kelly?
I was a little, well, I did text a friend a few weeks ago who lives down there, asking if she wanted to go, and she never got back. She didn't, like, she has a kid who's even younger than mine, so we didn't. But I was like, oh, that would have been fun.
Would have been nice to have made the trek.
It's a trek, and it is not just me. Like, from a very specific Bay Area perspective, the team is trying to figure out how to find a new facility. You know what I mean? Further north. Into the city
to allow people with busy lives like you, Kelly, to make it to their games.
I think it's also just like a vibe thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you don't want to be on the outskirts of even if that is a lot of people down there. Like, it's a what does it feel like to the potential audience? So, before we move away from we're going to move away from all our ball sports, our puck and ball sports, into our regular sports, Sarah, which is like running, biking, moving a distance. The cross country national championships, moving a distance, a finish line, a start line, going in between.
Okay, so we have the NCAA cross country championships
were this past weekend, which a lot of people like. I was thinking about this because like cross country is not a sport that like anyone, like, you don't really like care about it outside of college. I know there's this like movement to get it into the Winter Olympics. It's like not gonna happen, whatever. But like it's just not a sport that
Winter Olympics.
Yeah, it's just not a sport that exists outside of college. But it is very, very fun to do, like in high school and you know, like to have that team camaraderie thing.
Yeah, honestly, it's something that I don't fully understand. Like I just associate with an NCAA. Sport,
did you never ran cross country?
No, well, I went to high school in the Middle East too.
Oh.
So I ran.
You didn't have that?
You know, we had some kind of running, like, I don't know, in elementary school. I got like recruited onto the running, but we mostly ran on roads. Like we did like 3K, 1K sometimes. I mean, I was 9, so, but not cross country. Like my only experience of running cross country is like just running on trails. Or like a trail race.
A trail race. They have Masters cross country. I've run it with like the local team a few times, and they've done the Masters National Championship here in San Francisco, and I've done that once or twice just because, I don't know, it's fun to come in, 217th sometimes. Like, it's just wild. It's like so hard and so wild. But obviously, yeah, it's not like a thing adults do a lot.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a team, it's not as much fun if you don't have like a group of people that you're doing it with.
Yeah.
So I do feel like the pinnacle of cross country is NCAA kind of at this point.
Yeah, so can you just explain as a Canadian here how the team element works? Like how many people are on a team? Is it like the times are cumulative? Can you drop?
You really don't know.
I really don't know. Can you drop someone? Sorry for our Americans who are like, yeah, this is boring. I know how this works. But like, can one person drop off? Like if someone has a shitty time.
So cross country, general rules of cross country, and obviously like it varies. But general rules of cross country are 7 people on a team, top 5 score.
Okay.
Lowest score wins, and you just add up the places.
You add up the places, not the times.
Yes. So it's literally just the places. So that's why it's like really fun and really dramatic, because like you care a lot about passing every single person.
You care about actually racing people versus having a personally fast time.
Right.
Yeah.
So times like don't matter at all. I mean, they matter, but when people tell you a time that somebody ran in a cross country meet, you're like, okay. Because like you also don't know the terrain. If it was slow or fast. Yeah. You're like, whatever.
Yeah.
But because places really matter, especially when you go into the team competition, you'll see like a whole team of girls like, trying to work together to like make sure they get as many of their athletes ahead of as many of the other team's athletes, because every place counts. And the thing about your 5th, 6th, and 7th runners is they can still get in front of another team's runner and push them further back place-wise.
Oh, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why it's always like every person counts. Every place
I'm
counts.
so glad that we talked about this, because I mean, obviously I know
dramatic.
what it is. I know that it's been I've known for a long time it's in teams. I know that you're, you're running not on the road. Like I have a sense of it, but not like the specifics. So
right. So it's very dramatic.
And then do you have at the beginning of the race, right? Is there some point at which like you hit a trailhead or a road, like where people are like jostling for position?
Yeah. So I would say like cross country is not typically run on like trails in the way I think you or I, Pacific Northwest, think of trails.
Yeah.
Like they're not narrow. Cross country is usually run on like golf courses type things or like think of England fell running.
Yeah.
Hay bales and mud and that kind of thing, you know.
Fell running can actually be quite hilly and steep.
Yes, it can. But I was saying it's more similar to that than like trail running per se. And so almost always you have to start in like a big field because you have 200 runners like all starting together, and then it narrows down at the end of that, like almost always, because you have to kind of like spread out. So it gets very jostly, very like pushy,
right?
Lots of drama, you know, that kind of thing. So a lot of people love the NCAA meet because of this, because of everything, just right, because it's like weirdly high stakes for people who are not going to be like that fourth and fifth runner. Like they're not going to be pro runners. They're not. You may never hear like, but this is the pinnacle of their like athletic, which is a big deal, right? Like it's a really hard meet to make as a team. It's a really hard meet to make as an individual. It's kind of like how like the Olympic marathon trials are like really exciting because you have 200, 300 runners
that are running fast. Yeah. And I also, honestly, anything making running into a team sport, I'm so here for, because it's way more fun.
So it was, and the other big thing this year was that we had the defending champ, Doris Lemngole, who run for Alabama, was from Kenya. And she, she is from Kenya, but she has race. She's like in her third or fourth year at Alabama. She's kind of developed up through that. And she's a little older. She's 23, but she certainly isn't like
aged.
Yeah. Aged. She also is good enough that she raced like the world championships, the regular world championships for track in September, and placed like fifth in the steeplechase. And then at the same time you had, this freshman that everyone's been eyeing from BYU who set like all these national records as a high schooler, who's like 18 or 19, whatever, and had won like everything leading in, but they hadn't gone head to head yet. So that was like, who's gonna win? And Doris won. I think I really like her. I think she works really hard. I think it kind of not instigated, because there's a debate been going on for a long time about how many runners not from the U.S. are in NCAAs, how many colleges recruit. And I think it's coming to a head because some people said some like vaguely racist things over the weekend, but it's also coming to a head because NCAA is wildly changing like the landscape with like NIL deals and with like how much money can be made.
Right.
And so now it's really, really tempting for people who maybe like an NCAA scholarship was like a good deal before, but wasn't great. Now there's like more money to be made. So it's obviously like that's a bigger incentive. And so now there's also college coaches who are paying recruitment companies to go to Kenya or Ethiopia and find kids to recruit. And sometimes they're recruiting kids, I'm saying in quotes, who are like 25 or 26 or 28, who are like actually basically semi-professional runners. And then that's creating this distortion coming out of Kenya where you are having, like there has been instances of like people dropping dead at some of these trials in Kenya to try and make a college team because now the incentives are all distorted. So anyway, this is coming to like a head now because it's like, not a head, but it's coming up over and over because it's like, well, what is the point of NCAA? Is it to take 17, 16, 18-year-olds and teach them skills and develop them?
Right.
Or is it to like win titles however you can?
Yeah. And it's also, I don't know, as a Canadian, the NCAA systems always seemed a little bit weird because it's like, it's tied to so closely, obviously, to like actually getting an education. So it always begs the question, like, why are you at university in the first place? And what are we prioritizing? And I don't know. It's just, it's a lot of money for young kids, a lot of attention. These things can sometimes go wrong if not managed well.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the issue right now is, like, I am 100% on board with, like, the athletes. I am 100% on board with, like, the athletes, like, wanting to, like, get, like, a college education. Like, I think that's part of the issue right now is, like, I am 100% on board with, like, the athletes, like, wanting to, like, get, like, a college education. Like, I think that's part of the issue right now is, like, I am 100% on board with, like, the athletes, like, wanting to, like, get, like, a college education. Like, I think that's part of the issue right now is, like, I am 100% on board with, like, the athletes, like, wanting to, like, get, like, a college education. Like, I think that's part of the issue right now is, like, I am 100% on board with, like, the athletes, like, wanting to, like, get, like, a college education. Like, I think that's part of the issue right now is, like, I am 100% on board with, like, the athletes, like, wanting to, like, get, like, a college education. Like, I think that's part of the issue right now is, like, I am 100% on board with, like, the athletes, like, wanting to, like, get, like like football, basketball, the athletes that a university system was basically just using and spitting out and propping up like a business on, like that was a business and they were using like free labor essentially. Like I think they should get paid. But then I think some of the things you're saying where like these are 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds and like that some of our sports, some of the smaller sports kind of avoided those issues because no one was paying attention to them.
Yeah. And then
they got a nice education.
I also and I also kind of get the questions around. So now you're sending recruiters out globally, recruiting people recruiting people in their mid-20s, you know, and are those people worthy of a scholarship and free education? Maybe. You know, but like it's interesting, like, okay, what are the actual parameters on this, you know?
Yeah. And I think if, you know, you wanted to start being like, what is the problem? I don't think it's foreign athletes, right? I don't think I think like probably it's recruitment methods. Probably we need to like, it's also apparently like, because the stakes are higher and higher and higher, it's pushed like more and more people into like doping arena or like taking things they should, right? And I don't think we want like 21-year-olds thinking about that, right? So I think like if you want to regulate, I think that's where you will need to like start looking at is like, what are the incentives? How are we pushing?
Well, you start to have all the problems that pro sports have,
right?
Because you are a pro sport,
which is honestly my issue right now with like what college football has turned into is it's just semi-professional football, and then what is this really about? And then why am I watching semi-professional football on TV? It doesn't make sense.
Why am I watching semi-professional men? I mean, just going back a few years before we even begin to put the women on TV, which is like my point last time about that's what annoyed me so much about the Canada's junior hockey team being everywhere in the pubs when I first came back to Canada. And it's like, but wait, I can think of several other non-junior, fully professional women's teams who I would love to see on this screen. So yeah, I can see how you would feel that way.
Oh yeah, no, I think the college thing is a mess. And maybe we'll have like Victoria Jackson come on and talk with us in the spring, who's like an expert on this, because the college thing is a mess. The U.S. college system is imploding.
I think this is really worth unpacking. So let's get that episode scheduled.
And this specific cross-country problem is just, you know, a side problem of the bigger college problem.
Makes sense.
All right, I was joking that we were going to transition to our big topic of the week by saying, speaking of eating disorders,
which sort of comes with the territory in running and some other sports. And I think we're going to talk about all of that. But you interviewed Samara Maxwell from New Zealand.
Yeah, so I got to give a big shout out. Sammie Maxwell actually emailed us after we talked about her in the Feist newsletter, which we send out every week with this podcast.
I love that. Thank you for emailing us, Sammie.
And she was like, I'd love to come on and chat. And so if you don't know Sammie Maxwell, she won the cross-country mountain bike World Series this past year. She took 8th at the Olympics. But she's made a bunch of news last year because her governing body in New Zealand did not name her to the Olympic team because they said she had not made enough progress on overcoming her eating disorder and it would be unhealthy to name her to the Olympic team. And then she appealed because she said they like just had some of their they just like didn't have their facts right. Like actually she had made X progress and they had like mixed up their numbers.
Yeah.
But it kind of, so anyway, she ended up getting named. She like filed this whole appeal. The governing, the tribunal or whatever they have, ruled in her favor. But it ended up opening this kind of whole debate about what is the role of a governing body to like stop an athlete or not. And so that was what she wanted to talk about. She wanted to talk about kind of dealing with disordered eating and cycling. And I thought it was like a really interesting conversation. So welcome, Samara Maxwell. Sammie, you're the first New Zealand cyclist to ever win a world overall mountain bike series title. Is that right? Did I get that right? All right. And I know you talked a little bit about like this year doing that and the stress of, you know, coming from like a disordered eating background. It was like hard to balance. How did you manage to kind of, you know, have such an amazing performance and balance all that stress and all those issues?
I was really lucky just in terms of being able to get specialist support. So I know in New Zealand there's a few kind of specialist clinics and it's really, really difficult to, one, get access to them. And there are a lot in the private sector, so it's kind of expensive. Some of them are in the public sector as well, but I think I went through a bit more of a private route. And I got some really good support from a specialist psychologist, a nutritionist, and endocrinologist while I was overseas.
Hmm.
But I think one of the main things that they stressed really important for me was that like what we're doing while I'm racing and while I'm overseas is not full therapy. It was more just maintaining a state of health, um, so that I didn't
Okay.
deteriorate throughout the season. But I definitely found it's super engaging, and it was really cool for me to kind of be able to get that support and see, wow, because of this, I was able to maintain form. I was able to stay strong, but I was also really aware of those aspects and those areas of my training that I was being held back, and my performance on race day been held back by these like eating disorder thoughts. So I came to the end of the season, and
Huh.
they were kind of like, like what we did wasn't therapy. It helped you maintain. What are you thinking? And I'm like, I'm ready to kind of go all in therapy and stuff, which is really cool.
Oh, so like now you're kind
100.
of home, and so you're doing like
Yeah,
more
exactly. Yeah, it's really,
therapy.
I think something I had to go through. And if anyone's struggling out there, there's a book that my psychologist recommended called by Tabitha Farah. I don't know her last name, but it's called My Fear of Weight Gain and Why I Have It. And it really just explores like the basics of eating disorders. I think it's like 40 pages. I literally read it while I read it on my Kindle while we were driving to like the airport back from Brazil or something like that, like super quick. And after reading that book, I realized like there's still so far to go with the cycling culture around eating and food. And as long as I'm like
Oh.
surrounded by this environment of high competitive kind of disordered behaviors, I'll never truly recover. So that's why you really
Hmm.
focus on it. That's what I'm focusing on it in the off season while I'm out of that environment and really able to kind of get back to what really matters to me and not have those external pressures coming in and feeding into me. Yeah.
Sure. What do you think? I mean, maybe you can tell me a little bit
Mm.
about your history of how you ended up here, but like, what is it about the cycling culture that you think is still just so?
Yeah, no,
I want to say bad, but
it's stuck on habits, I think, it's the cycling culture. It's stuck on habits and
Mm.
tradition. And I think that it's changing for sure. Now we're starting to look at what we're doing and questioning why, right? Why did we used to go for
Hmm.
10-hour bike rides or train for 10 hours a day and have, like a few handfuls of of nuts or bananas? Like that's not enough. Why do we as
Yeah.
women try to train like men, because that was what was happening, but it's not true. So I think in terms of like learning, the cycling culture is starting to change and question why we're doing things. But I think the biggest difference is that for me, like behaviors that are quote unquote disordered, really like avoidance of fat or over compulsive exercise,
Hmm.
the behaviors in of themselves, yet they're problematic, but the reason I do those behaviors is the main problem. So for my teammate, for example,
Okay.
just say we sat down for dinner one night and they cut around the egg yolk or something because they maybe didn't want like lots of fats the night before a race or something like that. Or maybe they were having avocados and walnuts and avocado seeds and like lots of other
Mm.
fats and salmon, and they're really happy, and they're like, actually, like the purpose of this egg for this meal in particular is some protein. I have lots of other fats. Maybe I don't need that one. That behavior for them is not disordered. It's educated and it's realistic and
Sure.
it's informed of decisions, and they're not avoiding something. The behavior is not driven out of fear. But for me and my mentality, I would see that behavior and my brain would click onto that and go, see, that is something you need to avoid. No matter how much you sit here and do
Hmm.
therapy and tell yourself, oh, fats and weight gain isn't something I need to fear. If I'm still seeing those behaviors, my brain will
Uh-oh.
catch on to them, right? The brain is the master of seeing what it wants to see. And I think that that's the difference, is that for me, my brain can't logically sit down and rationalize that those behaviors
Hmm.
aren't driven by fear in those people. and it just kind of cottons onto that and then runs with it.
And where do you think, I mean, you're still very young, right? So where do you think this came from? I mean, did you have certain coaches, or I don't know the cycling culture in New
So
Zealand
the
super
cycling
well.
culture in New Zealand is so, I'm so lucky. I think for New Zealanders, we dream of just getting to go overseas, you know? We don't dream of going pro.
Oh,
We don't dream of winning World Cups. It's always just like, and in that regard, I think I was blessed in the fact that I was always such like, just get to the next goal. I wasn't caught up in like, I
mm-hmm.
have to do this so that I can get on a pro team, so that I can win this race, so that I can get seen, so that I can earn a salary, so that it was just win this race, have fun, you know, like a lot of staying in the cycling community and locally and club races, you know, like Wednesday Worlds and stuff like that. So you know, the cycling culture in New Zealand's not like that at all. It's not pressure driven.
Okay.
For me, I think that's anyone with an eating disorder. It's the $1,000,000 question, and I think no one ever really gets a real answer. It's not like you know,
Okay.
it's not like you get COVID because you've got virus. Like I think it's just
Sure.
an unlucky mixture of my personality, and then normally there's some sort of not traumatic event, but just hardship or something. So for me, when I was quite young, I did like a boot camp that was, you know, really cool, and it drove leadership and opportunities and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
in hindsight, for me, it came during a time when I was just getting introduced to training properly, and it was just too much. And all of a sudden, I just lost heaps of weight
Hmm.
really quickly. And when you combine that with a malnourished brain, and then I started getting that athlete identity, and my body really cottoned onto that and said, "This is what you're
Right.
respected for. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to push for." It all just kind of accumulates into just a big ugly mess, and then yeah. Yeah, and there's a
Okay. Just
few
kind of
genes in the
spirals.
brain
Yeah.
and well, genes in your body which
Hmm.
lead to genetic like predispositions, I guess. And sometimes it is just you
Hmm.
lose a lot of weight, your brain becomes malnourished, and your neurons rewire, and that's the way it is. You know, all of a sudden you do start really getting a fear response from thought of food and stuff.
Hmm.
So yeah. Yeah.
Oh wow. And then obviously, I mean, you're telling me kind of about this now, but it kind
Mhm.
of really came, I think, like to the public when you went through the whole Olympics trial, right? So you took off 4 months, kind of in the lead up to
Yeah.
the Olympics, something like that, 3 months to kind of go through recovery. And then the governing body in New Zealand said, you know, you weren't healthy enough to be appointed to the Olympic team.
Yeah.
Can you kind of like, how did you find? Yeah, what was that like? How did they tell you that? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know how I would react if somebody
I
told me
was
I wasn't.
pretty upset. So I
Yeah.
think it was around this time last year. I think it must have been. No,
Hmm.
like this time and the year before the Olympics. I hadn't gone to the Olympics. We were just getting to
Right.
the Olympics. I'd come back and I'd won under 23 worlds. And all of a sudden, like up until that under 23 worlds, mountain biking's a really not popular or like not well funded sport. It's the same with everywhere you go, right? You
Sure.
get funding for Olympic medals, and up until this point, New Zealand's had
Hmm.
like maybe one medal contender, but it's not. It's one race. We have one athlete. We don't get funding. So I get
Right.
back from under 23 worlds, which I've won, and it was the first year that mountain biking and Cycling New Zealand were like, we're gonna give you some funds. We're gonna help fund you from the government. And I was like, awesome, you know, like I thought everything was good. And they had a meeting and they sat me down and they said, Sammie, like, we've done your medical exams. Your hormone profile is like terrible. Your bone density is shocking. Your, you know, your BMI is not good. We don't care about the
Hmm.
results. You're 20 and you're on a path to self-destruction, kind of thing. And I was like, okay, cool. Like,
Hmm.
I didn't really. At, I said, oh, I'll coordinate, and they said we want you to start seeing specialists, and I for your eating disorder. Oh, because also before that, I had had meetings with nutritionists and the doctors and the psychologists, and they all had a
Sure.
meeting, and they went like, this isn't a normal athlete. We're not equipped for this. We can't do this. And so at that stage, I was just like playing ball to go to the Olympics, if I'm being honest. I was just like, yeah, sure, I'll see who I have to see. I'll tick the boxes, whatever. And so I go along and they told me, a few months off the bike at least. So I had a meeting with my manager in early January and I said, like, we can't do Brazil kind of thing, those early World Cup races. And I've got to stay home and kind of hopefully get into the Olympics. And it was partly my fault, partly just no one really thought about it. But because I took those Brazil World Cups off and the early ones, Nova Mesto, whatever one was after that one, I didn't actually get any races for the qualifying period. So then because of the Cycling New Zealand rules and regulations, they couldn't select me. So if I had gone overseas and raced, then I wasn't, complying to their health requirements.
Right.
So I was like, damned if I do, damned if I don't. And so then I had to apply for a special exemption because I didn't have any results in that qualification period. And I understand why Cycling New Zealand did it, but I applied for a special exemption and they said, like, no. At that stage, I had been improving. My bone density was better and my hormone profile was better, but it still wasn't actually good. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Okay.
And so
Sure,
they were
sure.
like, we're not willing to take the risk kind of thing. And I was like, cool, like, I understand that. And the specialist was still like, Sammie still has work to do. We want her to stay back in NZ. So I can see why Cycling New Zealand at that stage isn't going to put, like, you see an athlete playing rugby and she'll get concussed and she'll get up and she'll go, I want to play. I'm good. Let me go back on the court. So I understand why Cycling New Zealand was apprehensive of that, and they said no. Like, at this stage, we're listening to the medical professionals who say you're not ready. You're not ready to race. You're not mentally fit to race. And I said, cool. Like, I know my body. I know the work I've done, and I just need to do this kind of thing. So I went through the sports tribunal, and we reevaluated my health results, and there were some mistakes that had been made in the statement. So like my previous bone density was mixed with my current one. So then because it had improved, they were then saying it had decreased and stuff like that.
See.
So that was, a bit of that. And then there was also just a bit of, I think they acknowledged the sports tribunal when they passed my case. They said that there really needs to be a bit more thought around the way we treat anorexia recovery. I think because mountain biking is quite different from track cycling, which is where a lot of Cycling New Zealand Federation come from. Eating disorders are not common there at all. And I think that they see the word anorexia and they were just scared because Cycling New Zealand had gone through a big cultural change and it's a really safe and inclusive environment. And I think they just really wanted to make sure that they were sticking with their values of, putting athletes' health first, even if it means having to stop their dream. Like they didn't want to walk away at the end of the day and go, shit, did we just risk Sammie's career? But yeah, I'm glad I went to the Olympics, but I'm also really glad that Cycling New Zealand stepped in because without them, I wouldn't have my psychologist I have today. I wouldn't have my endocrinologist. I wouldn't have that team around me. Yeah, I'm really just grateful for it.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, because obviously there's been more and more talk about like climbing has implemented a similar type of like if you don't hit certain health markers, you can't compete. There's been a lot of talk about if, the UCI should do something similar for the world. So yeah, do you think, like, how do you feel about that? Do you think these like governing bodies should step in like they did in your case? Or
I think honestly a yes, because of the journey that I've had and the way I've gone through. I've had success, but I think my mentality around it's also really changed this year after my success. I sat down with my psychologist and I said, like I've spent a few weeks back home, like digesting the season. And it was strange because I realized I'd come to this point where if someone had asked me, like, are you proud of your results? I wouldn't like, I'm not proud of my results, but it's not something I'm proud of. To me, I have like a really scientific mind frame, right? And I'm like, my training and my results is just a physiological outcome of my training, right? That's all my fitness is. And at the end of the day, I can't stand at that finish line at that interview and say the decisions I took to get to that training mind frame, or the decisions I chose throughout that journey, were 100% me and aligned to my values, right? Like, I know that there were some decisions that I made that were driven out of fear from my anorexia. And for example, when we were at the altitude camp, I completely botched the first 2 weeks because my body just wouldn't, like, my brain wouldn't let me rest. I needed to burn calories. I needed to keep moving. I needed to push X amount of watts so that I maintained this, so that I could eat this many grams of carbs per hour. I needed to be out on the bike, so I was preoccupying my brain so I wasn't being consumed by thoughts of food or my next meal. Like, so much of that behavior was driven out of fear from my anorexia. So I said to my psychologist, yeah, like, these results are great, but the only thing that I care about now is that I've gone through this process, and I realize if I can't stand at the finish line at the end of the day and say that's 100% me, like me, and I chose my values, my community, like valuing challenge and like integrity, like those are really important to me. And if I can't stand at the finish line and say that I honored those values in getting to this process, what's the point? So for me, my next biggest goal is not, it's not to win the Olympics or something. It's to just get back to a point where I can say, like, this success is me. It hasn't been from my anorexia. And I got here by facing that challenge, by doing something really hard. I've done it with an eating disorder. Now my challenge is, can I do it without? And that's like exciting and motivating for me. Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, you seem like you have a very good like view on it now, right? It's interesting that without Cycling New Zealand stepping in, you might not have necessarily.
Yeah, for sure. But
I'm
right? Just going back to going back to
but
that
it's like
question
tough,
of like, do the UCI need to step in? I think yes, because I think I'm lucky to have got that success and been given that hindsight. But until then, you're stuck in this like tunnel vision of just like, I need to get there to prove I'm to the top. And sometimes you need someone from that external point of view to be like, this isn't healthy, right? But then also in saying that, athletes, like, we're the ones that are setting the benchmark. We're the ones that are setting the normalization. It's like, if all we talk about is power to weight and someone's willing to sacrifice their health, then that sets the new standard, But if we all go, no, actually power to weight's important, it's sport, but we're not, like, we choose to not sacrifice our health for that, then I think that's also up to the athletes as well, to choose if we're going to value like what's important to us in our health, and making sure the next generation of riders is just as strong and as healthy as we are. That's up to us athletes to do as well. Sometimes you don't need the federation to step in if all the athletes can see the problem.
Sure. Which I think is obviously like the debate that's sort of happening right now, right, in cycling. Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of people who are going through like similar issues have reached out to you, especially like younger athletes. What do you tell them? Like, what do you tell someone who's struggling with, disordered eating? I
think this year's really changed, like what I would say. And what I say is get specialist support and stop biking for a bit. Like, honestly, walk away from the sport for a year. Go see a specialist and get it done, and get it done early, get it done well, measure twice, cut once, do it properly, because otherwise you get to my age and that, like, this is a bit your followers will love this, but I did like a scan of my uterus, and my uterus was like so small they couldn't even see my ovaries on the scan. And they're like, Sammie, like, it doesn't even matter. If you start taking the pill and you start ovulating, like, your uterus literally can't hold a child, kind of thing. So for me, I was like, oh, that's fine. I don't want a kid. But now I'm like, well, Sammie, when she's 30 or 40 and doesn't have cycling, like, maybe that'll impact her. So what I say is just, like, get it done when you're young. Fix the problem. The brain's incredible, and the longer you spend in this thoughts, the stronger those neural pathways are going to be. The harder it is to fix it, right? You're in a hole, stop digging. You're in a hole. It's as simple as that. You're in a hole, stop digging, get a ladder. Yeah.
Right. Anything else that you would want to tell? I mean, that's really good advice, right? But anything else you would want to tell people kind of you wish they knew, like, or that they misunderstand about kind of training with?
Just, you don't know what you're missing until you don't have it, right? So I used to think it was normal to wake up at 3 a.m. and literally be like starving. I used to think it was like normal to be like scared while I was riding to reach into my pocket and get something out to eat in front of someone. And like those I didn't realize, like, until I started talking to my psychologist, and he was like, it's not normal. Like, you shouldn't be terrified to eat while you're exercising in front of your friends, kind of thing. Or you shouldn't be waking up in the middle of the night starving. I used to come back from a bike ride with my dad, and we'd had a lovely day. And as we approached the car park, I'd be terrified and just like really angry all of a sudden because, oh no, now we have to get back, and now I have to start thinking about food again. And that's not normal. You should be getting back from a bike ride and being like, yes, and soaking like in your endorphins and just like enjoying the day with your parents or your friends or your family or whoever it is. Like not just like, oh shoot, now it's food, or So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me about all this. I know it's complicated, but it's really good to hear.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me be able to share my perspective. I'm just one person, and everyone has different opinions, but that's just what I think. And I'm really blessed to be in a place where I can share it and have shared what I've learned. So yeah, thanks.
Okay, so at the end, when she was talking about how she had, I don't know what the word is, but like her ovaries and her uterus had like shrunk up.
Oh yeah, that was crazy.
I will tell you, when I was at that Stanford conference, they had done in mice a bunch of testing on, calorie, and it happens in mice too. They like in the men have a bigger difference in something else, like
the men or the male mice.
The male mice have a reaction more in like bone whatever, but the women, the female mice have a much bigger reaction in their reproductive organs. So I was like, oh man, that is wild.
I have never, and as a triathlete, someone who comes from endurance sport, I've known a lot of folks who have suffered from REDS and LEA, right? Like even with or without eating disorders. And I've never heard anyone talk about a uterus womb. What is this, like 1962? A uterus shrinking. I guess that we have like menstrual disruption sometimes from not eating enough, but wow.
Yeah. So that's why when she said that, I was like, no, I actually was just listening. Like the scientists people were just talking about this. So real thing.
So I have to say though, Kelly, I absolutely loved Sammie's attitude about her entire process. I love how positive she is, how much she like accepted the things that were coming at her from the federation. She appealed the decision, was granted the ability to race in the Olympics based on that appeal, like is glad. She said at the end, like she was glad that the federation had made the decisions they had because it helped her with her own personal trajectory. Right. And I love all of those things. And I have to say, during the entire interview, I felt like what I really want is folks like the federations in some of these sports to start taking responsibility for their part in creating the culture that around these eating disorders, right? And like not just, and I think that's why I said REDS, however we pronounce it now, REDS and LEA can happen in endurance sports just with athletes who are following protocols given to them by their coaches, right? And there has been, it's an entire I don't know, like even that she told a story about one of her teammates who was cutting out the yolks of the eggs, and then she called that, oh yes, this was like, if they're doing it without kind of perseverating on it. I forget exactly what her words were, but these are good decisions for your performance. And I kind of thought, are they?
Yeah, I mean, I think what she was saying is like, obviously there's like, you know, some people like avoid fiber before a race because they don't want to like shit them, right? Like there's things that you could do from an eating perspective that you're doing them for like perfectly logical, reasonable reasons.
Right.
But then there's also like things you could do that you think are logical and reasonable, but actually they're like slightly disordered eating. And then there's things, and then that can take it like, and then there's things you could do that are actually, you're taking this like a step past where you're like, well, that's, and it's just, and obviously like you don't know what's going on in someone's head. It was her point.
Yes.
But to your point, like, if teams are telling athletes like, well, don't eat the yolk in your eggs, and then they're all doing that because they're being told that because you don't want to get too fat, that it creates this like culture that it's not necessarily that individual's fault or something that they went down, that they did what they were told to do.
So I think what I'm objecting to is the idea that there's a systemic problem in that especially with the women athletes, we've used a male kind of model of how to eat and perform, etc. That's based on power to weight ratio. Now, if we're talking about cycling, right, where we're encouraging female athletes, like based on, you know, going back years. I mean, now we're kind of smartening up, but like going back a few years, based on calories in, calories out, lose as much weight as possible. Like we've both been part of these types of systems, and then it's like, in order to change to a system that puts athlete health first, right, you have to change on the level of like the federation itself, I think, needs to take responsibility. Like I said, I think you need to look at the coaches. Everyone needs to be trained in this fully, and to put it onto the athlete, right, and then be like, oh, this athlete has a problem, right? Quote, I'm doing air quotes, people can't see. And then put it back onto the female athletes to be like, okay, now it's your, like, ultimately they are empowered to help themselves, right, through what can be a difficult process coming out of an eating disorder or coming out of red ass. But sure, but that's only part of, like, you can't address the entire problem by just focusing on the female athletes and telling them to change, or focusing on any athlete that has this has an eating disorder or a red ass. Like, you have to actually systemically deal with the entire problem as it existed. Like, I had coaches, so I'm just ranting now, but you know, I had a coach who used to watch us eat and comment on it, you know?
So here's my question, Sarah. Ready? Okay. Because I know you've talked to me about, and you obviously had some issues where like you passed out in a race because you weren't eating enough, and like you had coaches who like told you what you could and couldn't eat. Yeah. Why did you stay with those coaches?
Because that's what every every coach that I worked with there was this constant focus on leaning down, and what I can say is, as a teenager, I did have some disordered eating that would be separate. That would maybe have been like a psychological thing related to beauty standards, where we would go down a different road.
Being like a 16-year-old girl, right?
Yeah, like I'm not saying I'm immune to all of this when I'm about to say this, but what I'm about to say is like I had zero indications of eating disorder or even disordered eating outside of that environment, right? So the season ends, I eat whatever I want, right? If they told me, I did not perseverate about food, I didn't hate my body, right? I didn't think about like a lot of the mental aspects that come with, and I know people who have eating disorders, and I understand that it can be like a lifelong thing. It's really difficult. And I did not have any of those indications. What I did have was coaches who said, if you want to perform, here's what you should eat. Here's what you should eat for dinner. Here's how many calories. Here's foods you should avoid, etc. We were constantly doing experiments. Like, that, it was actually so ingrained in the culture. So to now, that's why I just get like a little annoyed when it's like, now it's put. If you had tried to put that on me, like I was told to do this by the people who were supposed to be the experts.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree, right? Like, obviously there's a point at which, like, when, you know, we say like, oh, she needs to fix herself. You're like, well, does she?
Yeah. Like the amount of, and you know, like I would have to have basically stood up to everybody, Like there was no one who did not think this way.
So this is what the governing bodies are trying to fix, right? Like to Samara's point, like by New Zealand Olympic Committee, whatever they're called, stepping in and being like, look, like we don't feel good about what's happening here. Like we want you to stop cycling, like take care of yourself. It's not more important to us to win medals than for you to get healthy. I feel like that is what they're trying to do, right? Like, and like climbing last year in 2024 became the first like international federation to implement a like, if you don't pass these tests for reds, you cannot compete. Because from a like, what is it? I mean, you and I have talked about before, like, we can't regulate culture. We can regulate actions and behaviors, right? So climbing, the governing body can't say, like, coaches stop being shitty. They can, but what does that look like? And what it looks like is if you can't pass these REDS tests, like, your athletes can't compete. Now, obviously that doesn't, like, obviously you immediately can see how that could go badly, right? But like, I understand that is what they're trying.
And I think what I'm also trying to say is that I think the federation leaders and the coaches themselves and anyone working with the athletes should also have to pass some kind of
that's probably
tests or basic understanding about how athlete health works and female athlete health works.
Sure. There is an interest, like, because on the climbing note, because climbing has really, really been dealing with this, it's something like when they surveyed kind of going into that decision a year ago.
Well,
to like
anything more power to weight, you know, you can picture these sports like I completely understand why this ends up happening in climbing.
And so like going into that decision a year ago to implement, like you have to, you know, green, yellow, orange, red standards of REDS testing that are very common in REDS testing. Going into that, they did all these surveys. There was something like 49% of elite female climbers had an eating disorder. Yeah. But one of the studies kind of like, and you know, a lot of the top like 2-time gold medalists were talking about like they'd always been told, how do you get better? Lose weight. Like, how do you get better? Like the like right.
The things
so
I'm
a lot
saying.
of people, right? A lot of people came out and were like, this is a deep systemic problem in climbing. We have to do something. One of the interesting like studies I was looking at was they analyzed like asked female climbers about like their perception of, you know, would you be a better climber if your body changed, and also analyzed like who and what they followed on social media. And if you followed like influencers, you were way more likely to think your body needed to change anyway.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I had coaches who coached Olympic champions, Ironman world champions, be like on several occasions, you know, from different points, be like, you're so talented. If you just lose a couple of pounds, you do better.
Sure.
Or like that, this is the kind of comments. And when you look at, like, if I look at photos of myself, then it's wild. Like where were those pounds coming from?
Supposed to come from?
Yeah.
And this is obviously why cycling is now wrestling with the same thing climbing did a year. I mean, cycling has a deep, deep, long history. As you're talking about all this, my husband raced on like a semi-pro cycling team, and they used to say that shit, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah. It's not just a women problem.
No.
Yeah.
But like because they don't also have the beauty standards laid on top, like as soon as they left cycling, they just moved on. But like in their male cycling team, it was like, how do you get fast? Just don't eat. That's our training camp weekend, right? Like that was what they did. So cycling is which is why cycling right now is debating if they should implement a similar thing to what climbing did, right? Like, should they do what Samara's governing by and like start to be like, no, if you don't meet these, you can't race. You need to go.
Well, and you have this very uncomfortable reality, right? Which I know we have in cycling and running. I don't know about climbing, where when you first start down this road of trying to lose weight for performance, right? When you're still like, when you've been healthy up until that point, what happens is you do get a little performance boost.
Right. So
typically.
At first you think it's working.
So you go and you win some big race or something, you know, for some people who are already performing like with 1 or 2% below the top of their game. And then suddenly they go and they win, you know, like often for people, it's like a junior world championship or something like that. And then you remember that like, I was at the pinnacle when I was X number of pounds. Right? Like I can remember this. Like I ran my fastest half marathon. I was like 119 pounds or something. Right? But that was not a healthy weight for me to stay
and then
at.
You start to get
but at the time, you don't know. Like your coach, everyone's telling you look great.
Sure.
You know, or just constant, but really my body wanted to be 125 pounds, and that was actually still quite light for me. So you have the immediate boost and you're like, oh, this works. This is great. And then you're like, why am I always getting hurt? Why is my body starting to shut down? Why am I always tired? Then I can't hit my workouts anymore. And then you just start to go down this hole and it spirals and spirals. Yes. And then you think the problem is like, well, I just need to eat even less because that was what worked before. And then it like spirals more and more and more. And then you're like really struggling and And the whole time you're doing it, a lot of people are doing it for performance. Right. Like this is not like beauty standards. So most of us who are trying to like perform at world level, like beauty standards are like, we don't give a fucking crap. Right. Sure. Like it is an extra layer for some people, but like who cares, right? What we're trying to do is be the best in the world at something. And we've had, I mean, like you said, like, a number of people, we've had people who work for Feist, like that is that cycle that we just saw is very, very common, right? Like that is a very common cycle that people go down. And it almost always ends badly if you keep down that cycle, which, side point here, is why WADA, World Anti-Doping Agency, is thinking about banning GLP-1s, the diet drugs, because if people have always, because in these power to weight sports, people have always struggled with this, like they want to lose weight, but also if you lose too much weight, it literally is bad for performance and that line. So now they're like, well, what if I just take GLP-1s? Right. That solves my problem. Yeah. I was reading about this right before the show because my question is, when I have known a couple people who take GLP-1s, right? And you also you can't control what weight you lose, right? So you also lose muscle mass, right? So I guess one of the challenges that WADA is looking at is like, I didn't realize this. People are starting to take a steroid to like counter effect the muscle loss so that you end up with just fat loss, which I think like pairing those two things, then you're like, oh yeah, now we really do have a question of, is this a performance enhancing thing? Especially if you have to pair it with the steroid to counteract your muscle loss. Because I was like, why would athletes take that? Because you definitely lose muscle. I mean, why would athletes take drugs that could potentially kill them? Like, because but they don't always make like good choices. That's not exactly what I meant. Because what I meant was like muscle loss is also going to affect your performance. So if you're taking it for performance reasons, there has to be a, but it's like, oh, so now we're like, that's a spiral. Like now I have to take something else to counter this. I have to take something else. Yeah. And I think from WADA's perspective, like, okay, so GLP-1s like Ozempic, Wegovy, those are the big name ones. Like I can't think of all of them. Have been on their watch list for like 2 or 3 years here. And when something's on a watch list, what they do is they just track how often it shows up in athletes, like blood and sample profiles. And they don't do anything. They just like track it, try and keep track of like side effects. And like, because if it's showing up, if something, and they did this the same with like Tramadol, whatever the painkiller was a few years ago that people were starting to take just to like deal with pain. And then it was like, oh, this goes beyond the medical like label use of this drug, right? Like there are reasons people take GLP-1 for medical reasons because they have like, they have issues with weight. They have like diabetes. They have hormone issues. They have like other complications and there's like perfectly useful reasons. There are also a lot of people now just taking it as a diet drug because they want to look skinny. Right. And which is also just up to them. Like they're not an elite athlete. It's not something I would do because like wouldn't want to deal with side effects and I'm not a person who's ever going to pick like a voluntary thing that has side effects, right? But like but it is also obviously brought back in this whole big diet culture discussion. Yes. And so what WADA's trying to do is measure. And so sure, maybe there's some percent of athletes that have all these like medical reasons, but if it's exceeding the medical use, if it's like 80% of athletes are on this, then it has to be like, right. That's a lot. Right. They can't all have diabetes. Right. Like that doesn't seem. So their technical phrase is like if it exceeds therapeutic uses, right? Like that, because there's like 3 reasons you ban something. One is like if it's performance enhancing. One is if it like could harm or potentially hurt the athlete, and one is if it's against the like fair play principles of the sport. Right. Although I did like just reading that, I'm like, that is a really gray set of reasons. That you could like by gray I mean debatable on every point for every potential for substance. Sure.
And so I think right now what they're trying to figure out is like, is there performance enhancing effect?
Right.
Is there potential like health consequences, side effects, right, for an athlete? Not like, to your point, do they then start taking other things? Do they not eat enough to fuel their training and they have like another, right? Like what is the side effect? Or, you know, does it cause ripple problems in the sport?
Right.
And I think they're specifically looking at cycling, like to be very clear. I think overwhelmingly looking at cycling.
Interestingly, one thing I read is that it might allow the athletes to actually eat more and stay lean, which is very interesting because then to the, I forget which point it was out of those three, but to the point about athlete health, that actually could help athlete health.
Yeah, I don't know. Because obviously there's also a big push in cycling and in endurance sports to like get as many carbs as possible in.
Yeah.
So you're like, we'll see. It will be interesting because they're definitely keeping an eye on it. They're going to make a decision for sure before the LA Olympics because, you know, you don't want to have like an Olympic cycle where people start exceeding the therapeutic uses of a drug and then be like, oops, that was a bad choice. So they're definitely going to make a decision in the next 2 years. So.
Okay. Well, we'll wait with bated breath.
See.
Maybe find someone who knows what they're talking about and talk to them about it.
Oh, about GLP-1s? I mean, I think obviously it's a very loaded topic these days.
It is. We're in Feisty. We're in the process of building an certification for coaches about coaching female athletes better. You know, we have about 15 or 16 different modules, but one of them, we were like, we can't avoid this GLP-1 question. So we do have an expert in there talking about it.
And I think, like you said, like I think especially when we talk about it a lot with like our menopausal athletes, it's a big topic, but there also is very much a marketing now to like into the kind of like diet culture of the 90s, right? Like I was talking to like a running influencer who got reached out to by one of these companies and told, you know, just fill out this survey and we'll send you some free samples of the drug and like upload your pictures. And they had like a doctor online, like say like, sure, you could stand to lose weight. And she's like, how could I stand to lose weight? Like I am a fit, just ran all these marathons. Like I don't want to lose weight. It's not my goal. So like why, but like they like, let me send you samples.
Doctor assess whether she could afford to lose weight based on a photo.
One of those like online systems, right? Where you can get like drugs sent to you. And so anyway, the point is like, I just saying that she was like, this isn't even like, I'm not in a weight loss goal. Like, how could you look at my body and tell me I like that I could have like should when I'm able to do all these things I want to do? Like she's not like a big person. And then it's like, well, now are we just like, and they want her to market it to her audience of women. And that's where I think we get into the like, oof.
Yeah.
That's all my reaction.
Oof. Yeah, I'm with you on the oof. Yeah.
So, all right, Sarah, to close us out before Thanksgiving, what are your feisty picks of the week?
Okay, I'm picking Doris Lemngole for defending her individual title in the women's race, as we already talked about in the NCAA cross country, which I now fully understand, championship.
Did you know she was the first girl to defend since like 2011?
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm double picking her.
You go. All right, I'm going to go with Michaela Schifrin, who after we talked about last week, she won another World Cup, and she's now won 103 World Cups, insane. Which is just insane.
But I'm assuming she didn't win a reindeer this time.
She did not win a reindeer this
There's
time.
There's only so many reindeer you can handle. 9 is a nice number, you know, you can, people might expect you to deliver them presents.
Yeah, so that is, I mean, she just at this point is breaking her own records. Every week. Like when Lindsey Vonn won 89 or whatever, or 87, that was a big deal. And we're at like 103 now. So
amazing.
It's crazy. It's wild. All right. It is Thanksgiving this week. I hope everybody has a great holiday, whether you're in Canada and you celebrated it a month ago or here in the US. And then we will be back next week. We have 3 more episodes before we are taking a break around Christmas and New Year's. So if you like the podcast, share it with a friend. Rate us, review us,
send us a voice memo to join the conversation.
Let us know what you thought about everything this week. You can email a voice memo to podcast@livefeisty.com, or there's a link to like upload one in the show notes, and subscribe, follow on Apple, Google, Apple, YouTube, or Spotify.